This Easter Sunday, I finished the last of my series, Boot Camp for Saints, where I deal with the Gospel of Mark as it tracks the signs of the zodiac. I got it tracked along. It was brought to my attention by this book here, The Gospel and the Zodiac, The Secret Truth About Jesus, by Bill Darlison. Now, he's your typical liberal, you want to make this into mythology kind of thing. Nevertheless, he's spot on correct. The Gospel of Mark is organized along the lines of the zodiac. And I spent a whole year going through each section. As we were in Aries, I did Aries, etc. You can hear the sounds of Texas somewhere in the background. And on the last one I did was on Pisces. And I said, I'm going to come back around and do it again. But it's going to be one big video this time, where everything's going to be brought together. And I'm going to integrate the Homeric epics and the Gospel of Mark. Because the Gospel of Mark is interacting, shall we say. He suggests it's subverting, but I would say it's more like interacting with the works of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I said, I'm going to bring this in. I'm going to read the Iliad and the Odyssey. I've done my first reading of the Iliad. And I'm just basically doing a progress report. Now, my position is that after Jesus resurrected Lazarus from the dead in the Gospel of John, he married him. He was married to another man. I say over and over again, and I say here, Jesus is not gay, he's God. Jesus is also not a sinner, and yet he was baptized. So we must ask why. The same reason we need to ask why he married another man. I'm not going to go into that here. I'm coming up with some interesting answers, but nevertheless, my work on the Iliad is going to either make or break that. Okay? And I'm always prepared to break it. I always try to prove what I want to be true. I always try to prove it wrong. And when I want to be false, I always try to prove that it's true. I always basically, I don't sink myself. I go against my bias. Kind of like I broke this finger in rugby. And when I sealed it up, you're supposed to go against the break, and I didn't. And so now it healed crooked. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you have a friend who might like it, send it their way. It's the nature of my channel that I say things that people don't like. Jesus being married to another man, I get a lot of thumbs down. They're gratuitous thumbs down. They don't leave comments, just a lot of thumbs down. And that kills my standing in the YouTube algorithms. If you give me a thumbs up, even if you don't like it, but the video doesn't suck, that will help. My number one goal is not to stir up trouble. We're having a lot of fights in America over race, over homosexuality, over Christianity. And I'm saying, stop it. Love one another. Let's work through this. Here are things that I think help. So helping me a lot will do that. So anyway, let's get started. Why I'm reading the Iliad and the Gospel of Mark. Because of my work with the Gospel of Mark, I'm working in the Iliad. I just did my first reading. I'm working on my second. I always do 2 readings of a book when I'm working through it. Also, I'm a Western European man in his 50s. I should have read the Iliad decades ago. But as I'll talk about in the video, I'm actually glad I didn't. I'm actually glad that I waited. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give you a broad snapshot of this story. As I said, I try to prove that Jesus is not married to another man. And I did here. And I do this prayerfully, because I know what happens to people who lie about Jesus to get ahead in the world. Well, obviously this isn't helping me get ahead in the world, but if it did, I worked through this fearfully, and I always try to prove it's wrong. And then when I was done with this book, the epic, I just shook my head and I was like, the case just got stronger. It was all the way up here, and now it's up here. There are parallels with not just the New Testament, but with the Old Testament. The parallels can be blatant. There's one here that's going to be massive. Massive. It blew me away. I was like, wait a minute, what? And I kept underestimating how tightly linked the 2 stories were, because there would always be some detail pop up that I was like, yep. When I walk through it, it's going to blow your mind. You'll actually see that sometimes the New Testament passages, the Old Testament, are clearly reacting to the Iliad. Sometimes you might even say that they're subverting it. Now, I've heard a lot of things about the Iliad over the decades. Obviously, we all have. But never would I ever have believed that when I finished reading the Iliad, I would have broken down and cried. Whew. Oh my God. Every gay man needs to read the Iliad. The younger the better. Probably in junior high. If you're a gay man in junior high, you need to read it. We tend to be actually turned off by this. I hear a lot of, because it's passed off as this manly warrior stuff, and I wasn't really into that. I thought it's because I was a gay kid, but it's like my personality type. We're kind of helpless in our bodies. We flop around like a fish on a rock is what we do. It's like we're just helpless. We can't catch a football for crap even if we're heterosexual. So I'm working on that. I compare it also to boxing. I'm in my 50s, so when I was young, it was kind of a black thing. Muhammad Ali and then everybody that came afterwards. And I took boxing last year, and I absolutely loved it. I just loved it. I lifted weights for decades. It's like no more of that. I mean, I might do something for my guns because it doesn't seem to help a lot with that. I got some pull-up bars for that. But it's the most amazing thing. A man who's boxing, it's like a ship at sea in a storm. Any weakness will be discovered. It's just simply amazing. They have you do all sorts of weird, what to me were unnatural. But anyway, and I also want to talk about the idea of shadow boxing. We're just doing that kind of stuff. It's like, what's that about? It's just like so that you can learn the moves and you don't even have to think about it. And that's going to be important to understand what's going on here with the Iliad. We have this manly warrior stuff. We have a war going on. This guy fighting this. At the end of the day, it's all just incidental. It is a means to an end. Achilles is the main character, and he must die, as we all must die. The city of Troy will fall. If not to Agamemnon's army, it's going to fall to somebody else. What matters to Homer, the main point of Homer in the Iliad, is that he presents us the grand story of the redemption of one single man. It's all about Achilles. And Achilles is a gay man, probably closeted, who descends into the fires of crisis and rises up again in rarefied glory. The war outside of his head between the Greeks and the Trojans is the war inside of his head projected. Now, a lot of people deny that Achilles and Patroclus were lovers. And a lot of us gay people say they were, because it's pinging our radar, our gaydar. My conclusion that I drew from this is they were not lovers, but they should have been, because they were in the closet. I say he's closeted because there's a shocking discovery made later. He makes his own discovery. Now that's a hallmark of truly great literature, that shock. And if he weren't in the closet, it wouldn't be a shock. These shocks in great works act as a pivot. It turns the character, there's a change in the character, and then we go on down there to the conclusion. Now here's something to think about my overall position that he's a closeted homosexual. That would explain why he is so hot to be the greatest of all the warriors on the battlefield. So we can prove he doesn't fight like a girl. Also, am I the only one who thought it was strange that he and his best friend, Patroclus, had their beds side by side where they would have sex with their girlfriends? Nobody seems to have commented on that. There's a thing in pornography, straight guys for gay eyes. If you add everything up between them, they look gay. My position is pretty straightforward. I don't think it's unreasonable. If it looks gay, assume they're gay unless you have a reason to assume otherwise. Now, in this case, there actually is something that kind of trips things up. And until the very end, once I worked through what was going on here, I thought, well, he might actually be straight. After I finished the epic and thought it through, the reason that I thought might trip that up actually points right to the fact that Achilles is gay. Actually points right to it. It sounds crazy, but after I finish my case, you will absolutely agree that it's reasonable. You might not like it. It ties all sorts of threads together and even anticipates the weird stuff nobody seems to think about, like those two side-by-side beds. So let's set up our main character. In the beginning, Achilles is little better than a bundle of reflexes. Remember me talking about the shadow boxing? So you don't have to think. You don't have to think. Okay? Being a warrior is sexy. Oh yeah, totally. I'd do you a long time, no problem. But at the end of the day, it's just a skill set like painting or hairdressing. Agamemnon calls him out on that. This is book 1. In the translation, it's lines 208 to 214. This is Agamemnon talking to Achilles. You, I hate you most of all the warlords loved by the gods. Always dear to your heart, strife, yes, and battles, the bloody grind of war. What if you are a great soldier? That's just a gift of God. Go home with your ships and comrades, lord it over your myrmidons. Okay? Good Lord. Okay. His relationship with a great king like Agamemnon would not be one whit different if he were a superbly trained painter or hairdresser. He's just a skilled guy with some skills. As great as he is, that's the end of the day. But in the end, and just in time, he's going to throw all this aside. He's going to become a true man. Now, I call Agamemnon great king because that is a specific term used in diplomacy in the late Bronze Age, which is when this happened. A great king is a king of kings. We would call him an emperor, but there were no vast emperors in that day. The Persian Empire would come up 800 years later, because I'm putting the Trojan War about 1400 BC, 1 to 200 years before anybody else. The Assyrian Empire was 600 years later. They were big. Was big by the standards of its day, but even at its maximum size, it was little bigger than Germany. Now, I'm glad. Now, I waited way too long to read this, but it turned out to be a good thing because I read a lot of archaeology before I read the epic. Its broad outlines, it is correct in its broad outline. It aligns very nicely with what the archaeologists have dug up, as I've just shown. The story starts out with an unsatisfactory equilibrium, as all great stories do. The Greeks had landed on the shores of Troy 9 years before, and now the war has ground to a standstill. Everything's carrying on as before. But then what happens to that initial equilibrium? In all great stories, everything's just going along, and then suddenly a shot rang out, or a meteor hit, or my ex-boyfriend shows up at the front door with the sheriff to get the dog. Another way I put it, if only they had, hey, let's go out in the middle of the jungle to visit that Aztec temple that's not on the map, and let's not tell anybody where we went. Lambs to the slaughter. Unbelievable. Now, suddenly we have a series of events resulting in the great king Agamemnon taking the war prize, Briareus, away from his most capable leader, Achilles. Briareus does not sound the way it's spelled. So I can't spell it and I can't pronounce it because they're both different and I just can't separate them in my head. He takes Briareus away from Achilles. Now she is a woman and she's a beautiful one. She's the one thing that he desperately thought he needed because she was proof that he was a great warrior. The most beautiful and well-trained captive women were always the most coveted prizes of these men. For all of them. For example, your buddy might look at Briareus and you'd be like, dude, don't even think about it. That's Achilles' girl. And he'll freaking take your head off. He's a badass. So Agamemnon in front of everybody takes her away from him. So what does that say about him? What is that supposed to do with his glory? His reaction to that is what threw me off. But here's the thing about the thing we think we most desperately need. Sometimes it's the last thing we need. Her role in the story is to get Achilles pissed off by her absence. In the end, he gets her back, then we never see her again. So I think we could agree she's not the point. It's actually worse than we thought for our heroes. Achilles had made a choice. He could either live a long, productive, successful life with no glory, or gain glory but a very short life. He chose in the latter, but now it looks like he made the choice for nothing. He's not even going to get his glory. 418 to 422 in the translation, book 1. Yikes. Excuse me. Mother, you gave me life, short as that life will be, so at least Olympian Zeus, thundering up on high, should give me honor. But now he gives me nothing. Atreus' son Agamemnon, for all his far-flung kingdoms, The man disgraces me, seizes and keeps my prize, and tears her away. So he wept and prayed, and his noble mother heard him, seated near her father, the old man of the sea, in the salt green depths. Okay, another little detail that's very, very interesting. His far-flung kingdoms. Kingdoms, plural. In the archaeology, something weird is going on in Mycenaean Greece. They're the Mycenaeans, by the way. The palaces have two throne rooms. They have a bigger one and a smaller one. These are different kingdoms. These are different kings who are fighting along Agamemnon. But he is a great king. He's the king of the kings. And so they obviously, one of the throne rooms were for him or for his successor, and the other for the local king. So even the tiny little terms here kind of mesh real nicely with the archaeology. Now at first he considers seriously going back home, and that's why he's not just throwing a tantrum. This is a very real choice he has to make. And that's one of the things that makes his story so rich. Zeus has closed a door, but he's opened a window. And the story ends when Achilles finally finds that window and crawls through it. The epic ends just like the Gospel of Mark, suddenly. So, the women are going to the tomb. Who's going to roll aside the rock, the entrance of the tomb so we can get in? The rock at the entrance of the tomb has been rolled aside. And they go in there, there's a young man there, and he's like, why are you looking for the living among the dead? Go tell the disciples and Peter. What's that about? And Peter. Go tell the disciples and Peter, he's gone to Galilee ahead of you. And so the women leave, and they're afraid. And that's it. That's the end. It's baffled scholars for decades. Early Christians, it drove them so crazy they added stuff to the end. The same with the Iliad. It ends with the burial of Hector. Achilles is still alive. The walls of Troy are still standing. Wait a minute. Where's the Trojan horse? If you're looking for the Trojan horse, you missed the point. It's the same with the awe-inspiring encounters with our resurrected Lord. You've missed the point. There's no corrupted or missing text. The story is over. A new, higher equilibrium. The ending of all great stories has been achieved. You start down here, it's working, but it's not satisfying. It gets disrupted, it falls apart, you have a big discovery, you move to the new equilibrium. We've established that. Everything else is a footnote. Jesus said it himself. It is finished. Allowing a proper funeral for Hector was the final act Achilles had to accomplish. He was ordered to do that by the gods, yes, but he did it with an open and a willing heart. Hector did not murder the man he loved. Hector killed him in combat. That's what Hector is supposed to do. He's a man at war fighting for his family and his country. Now that Achilles is no longer a bundle of reflexes, which he was before, he understands completely. After the death of Patroclus, Achilles returns to the battlefield. He has successfully emerged from his psychological death. He is crawling through Zeus's window. So here he's going on a rampage. This is like Dirty Harry takes out the trash kind of thing. And this man is dropped to his knees, and he says, my family will give you money for ransom. Come, friend, you too must die. Why moan about it so? Even Patroclus died, a far, far better man than you. And look, you see how handsome and powerful I am? The son of a great man, the mother who gave me life, a deathless goddess. But even for me, I tell you, death and the strong force of fate are waiting. There will come a dawn or sunset or high noon when a man will take my life in battle too, flinging a spear perhaps, or whipping a deadly arrow off his bow. Come, friend, you too must die. He never would have said that before. When they have their games, the funeral games for Patroclus, he is a host for the games. He is a completely different person. It is just, wow, this is the same man. It's like, actually, it's not. Both Achilles and all mankind now stand redeemed. It is finished. So now we're going to look at some of the specific parallels. Now, I love the book of Samuel and Kings. There are actually 4 books, 2 Samuel, 2 Kings, books of Kings. And a lot of archaeologists will say that there was no united kingdom of Israel under Saul and then later under David and Jonathan, and that all of that is embellishment. But I'm just like, I strongly protested, because those stories that you see in Samuel and Kings that talk about the kingdom, they're just like, they're so lively. They're so energetic. And there's a parallel books called the books of Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. They're called the supplements in the Greek translation of the Septuagint. And the literary value of Chronicles, it's declined dramatically. They're way down here. In 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel are way up there. And I was like, I don't know. I'm sorry. Well, later I realized that they were influenced by the Iliad. Doesn't mean the stories aren't true, but they were definitely influenced by the Iliad. And the connection is the Philistines. Now, these are the frenemies of Israel. You might see them called the enemies, but really they got along with them quite well, quite often. Frenemies is a better term. Friends who get kind of jealous of each other after a while. In fact, there was a list of kings discovered, and although it's hard to completely tell because it's written in a Semitic alphabet, we know that the names of these kings are not Semitic names, and they can easily work their way out to be Greek names. So I'm betting that they got these stories through the Philistines, because David's whole life was dealing with the Philistines. From the time he was a boy. Hello, David and Goliath. And so I can say that not only is it paralleling Mark, but it's paralleling, and you're going to see some stuff here. It's paralleling, I'm going to give an example from the book of 1 Kings. Okay, so book 1, 79b to 109. Line 79b to 109. That means the second half of line 79. And again, that's on the translation. That's not in the original Greek. To 109. Calchas rose among them, Thestor's son, the clearest by far of all the seers who scan the flights of birds. He knew all things that are, all things that are past, and all things that are to come. The seer who had led the Argive ships to Troy with the second sight that the god Apollo gave him. For the army's good, the seer began to speak. Achilles, dear to Zeus, you order me to explain Apollo's anger, the distant, deadly archer? Because he's sent a plague to them. I will tell it all, but strike a pact with me, swear you will defend me with all your heart, with words and strength of hand. For there's a man I will enrage, I see it now, a powerful man who lords it over all the Argives, one the Achaeans must obey, a mighty king, raging against an inferior is too strong. Even if he can swallow down his wrath today, still he will nurse the burning in his chest until sooner or later he sends it bursting forth. Consider it closely, Achilles. Will you save me? And the matchless runner reassured him, Courage! Out with it now, Calchas. Reveal the will of God, whatever you may know. And I swear by Apollo, dear to Zeus, the power you pray to, Calchas, when you reveal God's will to the Argives, no one, not while I am alive and see the light on earth, what good that's worth it, no one will lay his hands on you by the hollow ships, none among all the armies, not even if you mean Agamemnon here, who now claims to be by far the best of the Achaeans. Okay. It turns out it's against Agamemnon. So we're like 124 to 126. But among them rose the fighting son of Atreus, lord of the far-flung kingdoms. See, all the different kingdoms. Agamemnon, furious, his dark heart filled to the brim, blazing with anger now, his eyes like searing fire. With a sudden killing look he willed to Calchas first. Seer of misery, never a word that works to my advantage. Always misery warms your heart, your prophecies. Never a word a prophet said or brought to pass. Now again you divine God's will for the armies, brooded about as fact why the deadly archer multiplies our pains. Okay, so it's just like, man, you ain't nothing but bad news. It ain't nothing going to change today, it looks like. He has to do something and that ultimately basically he had to give up his woman, so he took Achilles as his woman. It's like, oh, Calchas is so great, well then I'll take your woman. Now the third part of this. Details are important. When I looked at these two stories here and in the Bible, I was like, oh my God. Now the great array of gods and chariot-driving men slept all night long, but the peaceful grip of sleep did not hold Zeus, turning it over in his mind how to exalt Achilles, how to slaughter hordes of Achaeans pinned to their ships. You want to kill a bunch of Achaeans? Trust me, it's gonna be important. As his spirit churned, at last one plan seemed best. He would send a murderous dream to Agamemnon. Calling out to the vision, Zeus winged it in. Go, murderous dream, to the fast Achaean ships, and once you reach Agamemnon's shelter, rouse him. Order him, word for word, exactly as I command. Tell Atreides to arm his long-haired Achaeans to attack at once, full force. Now he can take the broad streets of Troy. The immortal gods who hold Olympus clash no more. Hera's appeals had brought them around, and they all agree. Greece are about to crush the men of Troy. At that command, the dream went winging off, and passing quickly along the fast-trimmed ships, made for the king and found him soon sound asleep in his tent. With refreshing God-sent slumber drifted around him. Hovering at his head, the vision rose like Nestor, Neleus' son, the chief Agamemnon honored most. Inspired with Nestor's voice and sent by Zeus, the dream cried out, still asleep Agamemnon, and says, go and attack. Go and attack. Go to town. The gods all agree. Oh boy. Okay. I'm going to read this from the New Jerusalem Bible, not for any particular reason, but 1 Kings 22, 5 through 22. Where are we at? 4. Now, this is King Ahab dealing with King Jehoshaphat. After King Solomon died, the kingdom split in two. Ahab is the king of the northern kingdom of Israel. Jehoshaphat is the king of the southern kingdom of Judah. And Judah became a backwater. Israel really took off. Israel was an important kingdom. So they're about to go to war to fight with Aram, another state to the north, go to war with Syria. And he's called up Jehoshaphat to go with him so they can reclaim some land. And they have, actually this isn't just 5. I'm going to go back to 4. Okay. Jehoshaphat, however, said to the king of Israel, first, please inquire what the word of Yahweh is. The king of Israel then called the prophets together, about 400 of them. Should I go and attack Ramoth and Gilead, he asked, or should I hold back? Go ahead, they replied, for Yahweh has already given it to the king. That's what Jesus says, ask and it will be given to you. Act as if it's already been given to you. It's already been given to you. Jehoshaphat, however, said, is there no other prophet of Yahweh here so that we may inquire through him? Because obviously there are people who are going to tell you what you want to hear. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, what do you think he's going to say? There is one more man through whom we may consult Yahweh, but I hate him because he never has a favorable prophecy for me, only unfavorable ones. He is Micaiah, son of Imlah. I hope the king's words are unjustified, said Jehoshaphat. The king of Israel then summoned a court official and said, bring Micaiah, son of Imlah, immediately. So Micaiah is under the protection of Jehoshaphat, just as Calchas is under the protection of Achilles. So you even have the two kings. The king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, were sitting each on his throne, wearing their robes in the open space just outside the gate of Samaria. Samaria was the capital of the northern kingdom, with all the prophets in a state of ecstasy before them. Zedekiah, son of Kenaiah, who made himself some iron horns, said, Yahweh says, with horns like these you will gore the Arameans till you make the end of them. And all the prophets cried ecstatically in the same vein, saying, march on Ramoth and Gilead, success is sure, for Yahweh has already given it to the king. The messenger who had gone to summon Micaiah said to him, look here, what the prophets are saying is uniformly favorable to the king. I hope you will say the same as they do and speak favorably. Micaiah said, as Yahweh lives, I will speak as Yahweh tells me. When he came to the king says, Micaiah, should we go and attack Ramoth and Gilead, or should we hold back? He replied, go ahead, success is sure, for Yahweh has already given it to the king. Okay, the king then said, see, don't tell me this didn't happen. How often must I put you on oath to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of Yahweh? Then he spoke out. I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains like sheep without a shepherd. And Yahweh said, these have no master. Let them all go home safely. Then the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, Did I not tell you that he never gives me favorable prophecies, but only unfavorable ones? Micaiah went on. Now listen to the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh seated on his throne with the whole array of heaven standing by him, on his right and on his left. Yahweh said, Who will entice Ahab into marching to his death at Ramoth in Gilead? Death. At which some answered one way and some another. A spirit then came forward and stood before Yahweh and said, I will entice him. How? Yahweh asked. He replied, I will go and be a deceptive spirit in the mouths of all of his prophets. I will deceive you through other people speaking to you, people that you trust. Yahweh said, You will succeed in enticing him. Go and do it. And so you see, Yahweh has put a deceptive spirit in the mouths of all your prophets here. For in fact, Yahweh has pronounced disaster on you. Well, at least you got warned. You can't say you weren't warned. Oh, it gets better. I ain't done yet. If there's any king in ancient Israel that I can point to and say, this guy's the most like Agamemnon, it would be Ahab. Even in temperament. Now, Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus are of the house Atreides, and Ahab is of the house Omri. Now, this was a very successful military dynasty. It didn't last long. They're very well known. The Bible itself makes it very clear this guy knew what was going on. Now, the Old Testament makes that clear, but the Assyrians, another empire, claimed to have beaten a coalition that Ahab was part of. In fact, was one of the leaders at the Battle of Karkar in 853. But they had to come back 4 years later and then another 3 years later, so that can't possibly be true. And people from Cilicia in south-central Turkey, they were part of that coalition. And the Cilicians, they were allies of Troy in the Trojan War. So you have a big coalition of kings fighting another major king. That sounds like Israel's version, headed by a king of Israel. That sounds like Israel's version of the Trojan War, doesn't it? And he's kind of like grumpy, growly, grizzled, just like, he seems like a cool guy, but that's part of his temperament. It's like, this is Agamemnon. And they put a story here, Agamemnon. Doesn't mean it didn't true, but it's just something that they brought to mind from reading Agamemnon. As a matter of fact, these events happened right after the Battle of Karkar. And it looks like he's turning on to one of his former allies in that. I'm sure the king of Assyria approved. Now, you know his wife. She's a total bitch, Jezebel. Now, some of the imageries that symbolize different things, these are clearly manipulated in the Bible to reflect they're interacting with what's going on in the Iliad. For example, the main fighters have the spear. That's the number one thing for all of them. Okay? The only one who has a spear in the book of Samuel is Saul, the first king. And every time he uses that spear, he looks like a fool. So whereas everywhere else, it's a symbol of manliness, for him, it's a symbol of impotence. Now, on the other hand, David has his sling that he kills the giant Goliath with. Now, there are slingers all throughout the Mediterranean, and they're in the Greek army. Now, don't underestimate how dangerous these people were. They could pick a bird out of the air in mid-flight. You get hit with one of those rocks from a slinger, it's like you got hit in the head with a bullet. It's like a gun. Now, they're mentioned there briefly, but they're not really that important. Just briefly. The main guys are carrying the spear. So they flip that. David has the sling, and Saul has the spear. Now, we have David and Goliath. Well, we also have Ajax the Greater, who is a flat-out giant, versus rangy Hector, skinny little Hector going up against this big old giant. That sounds like David and Goliath, right? Now, I said that there is a shocking revelation. The pivot that turns the character and brings us to the end, that shocks him into wakefulness. Achilles is sending Patroclus off to fight the Trojans. They have overwhelmed the Greek defenses. They're fortified in their boats, but they've broken through and they're starting to burn one of the boats. It's going to be over very soon. Hector has led a very, very successful charge. So he says, okay, Patroclus can go. He can wear my armor. But when you beat off the Trojans, do not follow them to the walls of Troy, to the gates of Troy. Do not follow them. Come right back. These people still have to suffer for what they did to me because he refuses to fight. Now, of course, it leads to Hector killing Patroclus because he thinks it's Achilles because he's wearing his armor. And then he says this. Oh, would to God, Father Zeus, Athena, and Lord Apollo, not one of all these Trojans could flee his death, not one. No Argive either. Whoa. But we could stride from the slaughter, so we could bring Troy's hallowed crown of towers toppling down around us. You and I alone. Clearly, what he really wishes for is a world containing nothing but himself and his own glory. For Patroclus, whom he now sends out in his own armor, he regards as part of himself. This solipsistic dream of glory, everyone dead but us too, as a scandalized ancient commenter summarized it, so offended the great Alexandrian scholar Xenodotus that he condemned the lines as a work of an interpolator, who wished to inject in the Iliad the later Greek ideas for which the text gives no warrant, that Achilles and Patroclus were lovers. He's right, the text gives no warrant. Nevertheless, he is in denial. If it looks gay, assume it's gay. This is why I say they're in the closet. He's like, whoa, wait a minute. Why did I just say that? Because I love Patroclus, and I assume we are of one flesh. Sudden realization of love. The parallel to this is the rich young man, Mark 10, 17 through 22. There's a detail here in the Gospel of Mark that is only in the Gospel of Mark. I say this is the man that he married. This is his future husband. This is the Libra section. Libra deals with contracts, including marriage. It starts with the question about divorce. He was sitting out on a journey when a man ran up, knelt before him, and put this question to him. Good master, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. They're saying that people say that Jesus is denying that he's God, but he's actually saying, who told you I was God? So Jesus knows there's something up with this person. You know the commandments. You shall kill. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false witness. You shall not defraud. Honor your father and mother. And he said to him, Master, I've kept all these things since my earliest days. Jesus looked steadily at him, and he was filled with love for him. Sudden love. Mark is reading the Iliad the exact same way I am. That detail, filled with love for him all of a sudden, that's not in Matthew and Luke. They have a version of this. That's not there. They took it out. And he said, you need to do one thing more. Go and sell what you own and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. We're not done. Later, Patroclus, after he's died, he's come to visit Achilles. And there is a version of this, it's called Secret Mark. In Mark, it was discovered again in 1958. I've dealt with it in detail in other videos, so I won't deal with it here. Rest assured, it is authentic. So we'll look 23, 72 through 102. Again, in the English translation. No sooner had sleep caught him, dissolving all his grief as mist of refreshing slumber poured over him. There, his powerful frame was bone-weary from charging Hector straight and hard to the walls of wind-swept Troy. Then the ghost of stricken Patroclus drifted up. He was like a man to the life, every feature, the same tall build and fine eyes and voice, and the very robes that used to clothe his body. Okay? Robes, clothing. Hovering at his head, the phantom rose and spoke. Sleeping, Achilles? You've forgotten me, my friend. You never neglected me in life, only now in death. Bury me quickly. Let me pass the gates of Hades. They hold me off at a distance, all the souls, the shades of the burnt-out, breathless dead, never to let me cross, mingle with them. They leave me to wander up and down, abandoned, lost at the house of death with the all-embracing gates. Oh, give me your hand. I beg you with my tears. Never, never again shall I return from Hades once you have given me the soothing rites of fire. Never again will you and I, alive and breathing, huddle side by side, apart from loyal comrades, making plans together, almost like we're planning a wedding. Never. Grim death, that death that assigned from the day that I was born, has spread its hateful jaws to take me down. And you too, your fate awaits you too, godlike as you are, Achilles, to die in battle beneath the proud, rich Trojan walls. But one more thing, a last request. Granted, please. Never bury my bones apart from yours, Achilles. Let them lie together, just as we grew up together in your house. Again, Baricius was forgotten quickly. Don't tell me these two aren't gay, that they are not in love. But they never were lovers because they were, I believe, it seems clear to me that they were in the closet. The parallel secret mark. Marks of the Gospel, rethinking Morton Smith's controversial discoveries, discovered 1958. There's a resurrection of Lazarus in the Gospel of John. This is his version of the resurrection of Lazarus. And having become angry, Jesus went away with her, that's this man's sister, into the garden where the tomb was. And immediately was heard from the tomb a great cry. That's death. I don't talk about it here, it's too much, but there's elements of exorcism here. He's exorcising death. And approaching, Jesus rolled the stone from the door of the tomb. And going immediately where the young man was, he stretched out the hand and raised him, having grasped the hand. See that oddness in language? That's one of the things that shows that this is authentic. But the young man, having looked upon him, loved him, and began to beg him that he might be with him. And going out from the tomb, they went to the house of the rich young man, for he was rich. Now he loves Jesus back. And after 6 days, Jesus gave charge to him. And when it was evening, the young man came to him donning a linen cloth upon his naked body. So there's the clothes again. And he remained with him that night, for Jesus was teaching him the mystery of the kingdom of God. Now rising, he returned from there to the other side of Jordan. Now rising from what? Rising from bed. It was his wedding night. Whatever this was, it lasted 7 days. They're thinking it's a baptism. I was just like, no, baptisms don't last 7 days. Jewish weddings last 7 days. So you have the sudden realization of love and you have the return of love. Even that specific detail is in there. So Achilles loved Patroclus and Patroclus loves Achilles. And they are one flesh and they are to be buried together. But in the case of Lazarus and Jesus, they're to be resurrected together. Who meets the women at the tomb? A young man. In all the other Gospels, who's at the tomb? Angels. When does Jesus ever compare us to angels? After we're resurrected. This man is resurrected permanently. It strongly implies that. I think Lazarus is like the Virgin Mary. I think they're both alive in glorious resurrected bodies. Now, I've not read the Odyssey yet, but I read on Wikipedia that Odysseus in the underworld, he sees Achilles and Patroclus, and they're together, but they're separate away from everyone else. And Patroclus loves Achilles, but Achilles loves him more. Isn't that the way it always is? One loves one loves the other more. Come on now, don't stop overthinking this. These are lovers. I'm not being unreasonable. If you're going to say I'm wrong, that's cool. But you can't say I'm unreasonable. Now, something interesting I want to talk about outside of this. Going to finish with that. The gods declare that Troy would fall and the ruling family would be killed or enslaved. But if memory serves, and I'm on my second reading now, the Iliad never says that Troy will be completely exterminated from the map. In fact, Poseidon prophesies that the family of the renowned warrior Aeneas will rule the city. Wait a minute, what? That didn't happen. The Iliad doesn't say that didn't happen. Maybe the city was destroyed. Now, the fact that obviously, or is it obvious? It didn't happen. Aeneas is supposed to be ultimately the founder of Rome. That's why the Romans thought that, because, well, Poseidon prophesied this. It had to happen, so it must be talking about Rome. No, there's a way around this. In other videos, I've been doing a lot of different kind of research. This paper right over here. And the Greeks who colonized the region centuries later told us what happened. Aeneas would be exiled to Greece, but his son would return to Troy, and together with Hector's son, Scamandrius, they'd relaunch the city. Now, the thing about this place here, about this timing here, is people think that the Trojan War was 1200 BC, 1300 BC, 1400 BC. Nobody thinks 1400. Everybody thinks 1300 and 1200. 1200 was what's called the Bronze Age collapse. The Greek kingdoms were already destroyed. They're not going to be able to mount this kind of attack. 1300 There's something called the Hittite Empire. They were at their peak. It's in central Anatolia. There is no way in hell they would have let the Greek army sit at the gates of Troy for 10 years and not doing anything about it. And also, the Trojan allies are allies of the Hittites, if not outright conquered by the Hittites. So it can't be 1300 BC. Okay? 1400 BC, something weird is happening to Troy. Something's happened. There was a lot of debris, and they cleaned it up and tightened it up real fast. And by the way, for the Hittites, they actually signed a treaty with the Trojans. I think the king's name is Alexander. But something had happened to Troy, and they tidied everything up. And it looks just like a Greek Mycenaean trading colony. That's exactly what it looks like. But because it wasn't completely destroyed, we assume that that can't be it. But as I said, it was destroyed at the time, but the next generation, they came back and took over. So I'll let you know what's going on here. So, what do you think? I'm very proud of this video. I'm going to link to my other channel, Jesus in the Culture Conf, and you can go ahead and check out the video I put up yesterday that I'm also very proud of. It's about the American horror writer H.P. Lovecraft from the early 20th century. He is, well, he's someone we could be very proud of, but I have a lot of very interesting things to say to him, about him. That channel is basically for popular culture stuff, because he's the influence of a movie that came out earlier this year called Underwater. But again, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful. God bless.